Luke and Penelope had been hitched for 3 years, residing in a leased flat on the city's edge. Both held down jobs. Luke was a dyed-in-the-wool homebody, barely stepping out aside from work and grocery runs. Penelope, on the flip side, was constantly buzzing about, chasing new experiences and thrills. Their stark personality differences only became glaring after a few years together. Initially, Luke often accompanied his wife in her zestful life, meeting her halfway. But you can't change what's ingrained in someone's nature, and soon his phlegmatic tendencies prevailed. In the first year, Penelope persistently urged her hubby to join her at various does and gatherings, tirelessly trying to persuade him that he'd enjoy mingling more. But later, she saw the futility of her efforts and stopped bombarding him with details of upcoming events. Instead, she'd just inform him of where she'd be on a particular day. One weekend, she found herself bored at home again and decided to hunt for new adventures with her chums. They had a vague plan to start at a cafe, which she mentioned to her spouse. Around midnight, Luke gave her a ring and she answered with a chipper voice. Judging by the background noise, it was evident she wasn't at the cafe anymore. It turned out they had migrated to a nightclub, lured by the urge to dance. Luke was tense. Although he had never visited such establishments himself, he had heard that men often visited them in search of company for the night. Cautiously inquiring about Penelope's expected return, he subtly hinted at the right time for this. However, Penelope informed him that she would stay there for another hour or so. Despite the fact that Luke offered to pick her up, she refused, saying that she still had some strength left. Fatigue overcame Luke, and he unknowingly dozed off on the couch in the living room. In the middle of the night, he suddenly woke up with a pain in his neck. Much to his surprise, Penelope hadn't returned yet. He desperately called out to her, but she didn't answer. It took another half hour before she finally appeared, and Luke had no choice but to turn to her friends. Strangely enough, she seemed strong on her feet and spoke very clearly. Luke wanted to blame her, but she beat him to it, apologizing for losing track of time and offering to go to bed. The next morning, her husband got up early while Penelope dozed off, as if embodying bliss. She slept peacefully. From time to time, a gentle smile appeared on her lips, as if she was having an exceptionally delightful dream. When she finally moved, her husband asked about the contents of her dream. He asked cautiously, "Did I say anything in my sleep?" Her husband chuckled and replied, "I don't believe so." "Is there anything that you think I should have understood?" Having fully recovered from the stress of the previous day, he rarely held on to anger for any length of time. "Actually, I was daydreaming about a getaway. So, when are we heading to the beach?" she grinned. Her spouse had indeed been diligently setting aside funds for their much-anticipated holiday. They had been mulling over this vacation for quite some time and had even picked out a beach resort. Penelope had a taste for the finer things, always leaning towards luxurious offerings, preferably all-inclusive. Thus, her husband had been scrimping and saving for this grand escape for a considerable period. What he didn't realize, however, was that these savings would ultimately not be spent on their vacation. Throughout the following week, his wife seemed to be bombarded with messages on her phone, which she promptly deleted. He would make a mental note when the messages pinged in, and later, when he sneaked a peek at her phone, nothing. It dawned on him that she was concealing something from him. And if she felt the need to keep it a secret, it surely must involve him as well. Come Friday evening, Penelope was prepped for another night out with her girlfriends at the club. Her husband raised no objections. Instead, he hatched a plan to discreetly track her movements that night, keen to uncover who she might be meeting and what she was up to. Their first port of call was, as expected, a nightclub where women enjoyed free entry at that hour. The group breezed in and quickly found themselves at a table. He arrived shortly after, blending into the throng to keep a watchful eye on Penelope. She was laughing, enjoying cocktails and the company of her friends. Initially, they engaged in conversation and shared laughter. As the intoxicating effects of the drinks settled in, they proceeded to engage in the lively activity of dancing. Surprisingly, the wife displayed normal behavior and gracefully danced, unlike one of her acquaintances. This friend, despite being married, unabashedly danced alongside a young man, engaging in questionable movements. Luke pondered his friend's actions while capturing the scandalous dance on film. His wife, meanwhile, was scanning the vicinity, as if searching for someone, but refrained from taking any further action. Unexpectedly, something occurred that caught the husband off guard. Unconventional characters emerged onto a modest platform resembling a makeshift stage. The husband surmised that they were likely dancers, a suspicion that proved to be accurate. The performance commenced with suggestive moves that hinted at an element of undress, inciting enthusiastic cheers from the crowd. All eyes were fixated on the mesmerizing performers, with men admiring the sensually gyrating women, while the women were captivated by the central figure, a muscular man adorned with sunglasses. As Luke observed Penelope, he couldn't help but notice her intense fascination with the dancer. Inwardly, he felt a pang of offense, realizing that it had been a long time since she had looked at him with such admiration. Has a man truly captivated you for the entirety of this spectacle? He couldn't help but wonder. As the dancers retired backstage, Penelope bent toward her companions, whispering something in their ears, which elicited delighted shrieks. Rising from her chair, she proceeded elsewhere with a satisfied grin. Her friends continued to cheer her on as she followed a man into the service area. Her departure was met with applause. Quietly surveying the scene, Luke sought to avoid a clash with the security guard positioned near the stage. He shifted his gaze toward the group of women left seated at the table, spotting Lillian peek up and solder toward the restroom. Luke seized the opportunity to intercept her. "Stop, Lillian," he roared, effectively blocking her path. Startled by his sudden appearance, Lillian fixed him with a frightened gaze. "Toya, what brings you here?" she inquired bemusedly, allowing a sly smile. Luke countered, "Let's consider a far more intriguing question. Why did Penelope slink off into the service room just now? Did that slip past my notice? I can only imagine the denial you're gearing up for." But first, he reached for his mobile, revealing a video of her and a stranger engaged in push-ups on the dance floor. "Why don't we jog your memory a bit? That should weigh against any misrepresentation of your story," he stated coolly. Upon hearing this, Lillian's eyes widened even further with terror. "Penelope, she met this dancer previously and there were sparks," Lillian confessed. "I apologize. Truly I do. I had assumed she would come clean to you," she continued, shielding her face with her palms, concealing her shame. She had previously confessed to her husband about her engrossing dances with random strangers. "It's freezing, isn't it?" Luke queried, indicating his cell phone. But his wife offered no response. The discotheque provided no more attraction for her husband. His friend had exposed his wife's inconsistent nature, and he loathed even glancing at Penelope again. He could unleash his rage on the dancer, but on reflection, was it genuinely his fault? The lady of his own volition chose to frequent such joints after all, and he wasn't meant to examine the legitimacy of each patron's credentials. Luke departed for his home, hastily packing his belongings from their leasehold flat and stuffing everything into his vehicle. He didn't wish to inhabit the same living space as a fickle-minded person. Leaving the place would wash away every reminder of her past presence, and he had been longing to relocate nearer to his workplace, a proposal Penelope had constantly objected to. Her viewpoints no longer mattered to Luke, and the savings intended for their holiday proved useful. Luke soon found a suitable apartment for himself, and subsequently initiated divorce proceedings. Penelope tried to contact Luke, trying to present the whole situation as a terrible mess. Since Lillian did not admit to her that fateful night that she had revealed their secret to Luke, nor did she feel the need to justify her actions. When Luke sent the video to Nathan, Penelope's brother immediately evicted her from his house. Penelope offered her friend a place to live together after the divorce. Penelope continued to lead a nocturnal lifestyle, visiting clubs. This time around, Penelope was on the hunt for something long-term. Maintaining her accustomed lifestyle had become a struggle since she parted ways with her husband. Everyone knows that nightclubs aren't exactly the breeding grounds for lifelong companions. So, along with her friend, Penelope set out to find someone interested in sharing more than just a single evening by her side. Cheating Secrets podcasts like me